Welcome to the Council of Stellar Management History Function Guide for Players and Future Candidates. How's everyone doing today? Okay, so let's get going. Ooh, fancy transition. So I always like to start these things with a little bit of objective, what I'm trying to do. So this presentation hopes to provide you guys an easy to understand guide to the history, role, and the ever-changing functions within the within CCP and the EVE playership. And in addition, a framework will be presented for potential CSM candidates so they can perform, present, prepare themselves for the candidacy process, dealing with media appearances, social media presentations, and the direct player engagements. But before I go any further, who the hell is this guy? So I am Langtheren Sanzo, CEO of LA Activists Universal. I am the co-host and writer of Cap Stable Podcast. I'm also currently the executive editor and host of the CSM Watch podcast. So what do we do? So Cap Stable is a general knowledge show about EVE Online, geared towards the newer players, general news, information, some focused discussion. And a couple of years ago, we got into the concept of, hey, let's go ahead and interview these CSM people running, because one of the fellows who used to do it, Xander Fina, decided to run. So you can't really interview yourself and run for CSM. So we thought, hey, what do we know? Let's try it. And man, so the first year we did like 37 interviews. Second year we did 45 interviews plus 7 analysis shows, 2 of the interviews in English and French. So that got us thinking, we should have another show called CSM Watch, and all we do is cover the CSM. So it's a more focused group show. It doesn't necessarily come out as often, but we kind of target and kind of really delve into some of the issues that are come up with the CSM. So quick kind of introduction to my friends, the crew of the Cap Stable CSM Watch, our former CEO Hoots, Kuda, Stu, Turbo, and Bach. One question we oftentimes get told is, why do you do this? Because we can, and no one told us anything different. So said we all. So a quick little history of the CSM and how it came to be. So the first iteration, oftentimes what's referred to as CSM 1.0. It was a bit of a focus group. The first iteration, the CSM was limited to a focus group formed by CCP using player volunteers. CCP came up and says, we need people who want to be on this thing, and they took volunteers. And it was very limited in scope. Terms were usually around 6 months, maybe longer, maybe less. But this kind of iteration kind of fell out of favor and just kind of died out. So CCP wanted to bring it back to have the, bring up the discussions, reviving the CSM once again when T20 happened. The T20 incident, there was a former developer at CCP who was caught. He provided Ray Koku and the Band of Brothers an unfair advantage by providing them access to rare Tech 2, well, at least then, rare Tech 2 blueprints. And when the unfair action was discovered, it served as kind of the impetus for the creation of the CSM as we see it now back in 2007. So a little bit of history on kind of like a focus on what the CSM does. So the purpose of the Council of Stellar Management, CSM, is to represent the societal interest to CCP. This requires active engagement with the player community to master issues, EVE issues, awareness, understanding, and evaluations in the context of the greatest good for the greatest player, yada, yada. Now, this is taken directly from the CSM white paper. Now, in plain speak, it's like, what do you guys want? We want to know, but we can't directly ask you, because if we ask you what you want, we get 1,001 different responses. So let's focus it down to a group of well-learned, or at least trusted individuals within the community that can tell us, and we can go back and forth. So CCP testimonial time. A lot of people have said, well, why even the CSM? Why should we even have it? And the best answer to this, attributed to CCP Dolan on an interview on Cap Stable, episode 45, at the very least, CCP needs the CSM to function as an entity to tell us, we told you so. It's there to remind CCP, hey, this is kind of a bad idea. You may want to reconsider that. So the CSM is organized and kind of structured around this thing called the CSM white paper. It's the government document how the CSM is structured and is supposed to operate. It, of course, right now is currently being deliberated to take into consideration kind of some fundamental changes in how the CSM currently functions. So these, of course, influences are like moving from like a twice a year, usually summer and winter releases, to a more robust, a 6-week development cycle. We've talked about that. It's added a lot more work onto what CSM does. Also, the agreement with many of the members on CSM to do away with the ideas of offices. It used to be they used to have a chair, vice chair, secretary. That's gone away. Also, the CSM role has evolved since it was founded. It's not the same entity it was when it was first initiated and envisioned. CSM operates very different every session because of the individuals who actually make up CSM. Different societal interests, different pressures, different, the changing wants and needs of what we want. And also, the evolution and the evolution of the body and communication platforms that are being used. And quite honestly, our player needs change like every year. If not every year, every 6 months. So functions of the CSM. So originally I had put down junior game developer, and that's kind of misleading. It needs to be kind of updated. It's more like a limited game concept feedback to a group of players that we know. The canary in the coal mine effect, I mentioned it. It's the, hey guys, this is a really bad idea. You may want to reconsider what you're doing. The general focus group and sounding board, hey, what do you guys think about this? What do you think about that? What would you think the players would do if we did this? There's also the crisis management aspect to it. When the CCP does decide to go down a particular avenue and it doesn't work out, hey guys, CSM, how do you help us mitigate the damage? Can we kind of downplay, kind of let's smooth it over. It also works as indirect player access to developers. eVegas is very rare in the fact that we have devs everywhere around us. We can actually go ahead and talk to them, but that's not on an ongoing basis. They rely on the CSM to provide our many voices and kind of distill that down into some coherent narrative that they can use in order to kind of work on what we want. And also in reverse, interface between CCP and the rest of the playership. Because they can go and talk about putting dev blogs, posts on Reddit and such, but sometimes the best way to hear what they have to say is from ourselves and someone that we trust and elected into CSM. So CSM uses various methods of communications. We've all heard about Confluence, which is one of the software solutions that's now being used to kind of go back and forth, discuss, post notes, post documents. So it's been very handy for them. Skype, which is Cantor, quite honestly. Thank you. It is horrible because having to scroll back and back, it's just unnecessary. We've all heard about the summits, both summer and winter. Now the 07 show, which is a great vehicle for the CSM to also kind of talk about what's going on. Of course, the aforementioned dev blogs. Oftentimes, and unfortunately, they don't get as much talk or notoriety as they should. Many of the CSM actually have regular town halls, wormhole town halls, low-sec town halls, and also in-game channels. So thanks to CCP Lilo, one of the biggest complaints about the CSM is that various members communicate often, but in different mediums, blogs, on Twitter, social media, but we don't know where to find it all. And luckily for us, CCP Lilo created a Tumblr page where she's kind of aggregated and put everything there for us to use. It includes how to get a hold of particular members of the CSM, who's posting what they talked about, dev blogs, etc., including a handy-dandy spreadsheet where you can go ahead and catalog everything that's been discussed. So thank you, Lilo, for that. So the next issue we want to talk about, which is much bandied about, is the non-disclosure agreement. When you are, come onto the CSM, you're asked to sign this agreement, legal binding agreement. And the issue about the NDA is that the NDA itself is NDA'd. We can't talk about it, unfortunately. But we have via discussion with various current and former members of the CSM. We've talked, so what does the NDA really cover? And the NDA just basically is designed to protect proprietary intellectual property and any information that can be considered exploitive by the EVE players. This does not include interactions between the individuals within CSM or CCP, but members have been known to use the NDA to protect relationships, interactions, and lack of participation. So when you ask a member of CSM, what have you been up to lately? Oh, I can't tell you, it's under NDA. Pardon my français, but bullshit. They can tell you up to a point until the line is, or say, how has Mike A been performing? And for the longest time, there was a bit of a gentleman's agreement where if you ask a CSM member, hey, what's the participation of this particular other member of CSM? Oh, I'm not going to tell you because it wouldn't be prudent. That has changed in the last couple of sessions. We have had many former CSM step down because you ask a particular member of CSM, what's the participation of this particular fellow? He hasn't shown up, or he's been at 2 discussions. It's a way of keeping, they get it that we want to find out what the participation is. We want to keep them honest. We want to know what they're working on. So I'm going to segue over to the kind of type of candidate you're going to find in NDA, in CSM running for CSM. So there's the generalists. A great example of the generalist would be like Mike Azariah. Even though he is a high-sec candidate, he kind of wants to try to represent the entirety of EVE, whether white hat, black hat, or somewhere in the middle. Representational members who are running, and these are usually broken down in community, playstyles, or null-sec entities. A great example would be Sion Kumitomo, who is on CSM to represent basically the Imperium, nothing more, nothing less. So you have to mind for that. And there's representational for like wormholes. Corbex is a good example of wormhole play. Alexei Card, who used to be, is a greater representation of like, kind of like the mercenary types. Now, there is another type we call the F&I, the features and idea guys. These are guys like, get me on because I want to do this, or I want to do this, get on because I want to introduce this kind of ship or this kind of play style. The problem is that's very limiting. And if you go to CCP and say, hey, we should totally put in pink ponies that fly around in rainbows, no. Well, what do you do then? So generally, they're not the most optimal kind of individually put on CSM. The last ones, which we kind of put together, were the negationists, jokers, and pariahs. These are the fellow who goes, I don't believe in CSM, it's bull crap, vote me in anyway. And let me show you how it doesn't work. No. Jokers, a great example up to recently would be Code Alliance. For the longest time, they would run candidates who were total jokes and last minute would pull out. Because, aha, is it funny? Well, the problem with this, that when last year they actually ran a serious candidate, he was considered a joke because of the history that's engendered his particular alliance with they're not taking it serious. And there's also the pariahs. We all know those individuals that are known within EVE Online to have a nefarious background. Great example of this, and I know he's here. Zenuria is a great example. He is a pariah within the EVE Online community, but he will run. And there's many of these individuals out there. So player feedback. How do I get a hold of my CSM representative? So we all know we can get a hold of them in-game via EVE Mail. Many of them now are on social media, Twitter in particular. So if you're not in the Twitterverse, you can use the hashtag TweetFleet, which we often kind of commonly use to get the communication around, get the word around. Recently, thanks to Ash Darathi, a fellow from the Hydrostatic podcast and former candidate, he started up a solution on Slack, which we lovingly refer to as Tweet Slack. You'll find a lot of those representatives in there discussing back and forth in the CSM channel. Again, CSM town halls, roundtable discussions, and yes, Reddit. So may God help us on that one. So what do I do if I don't like what the CSM is doing? Vote. One of the biggest complaints about the CSM and its current structure is that there's a lot of null-sec entities who use block voting to get on. When participation is low, the power of null-sec block vote goes up. If you don't like the fact that that's so heavily like null-sec oriented, Get more people to vote. That dilutes that particular block vote. Change your vote next time. Vote with your feet. Vote for someone else, plain and simple. Consider voting for future candidates who serve as foils for these individuals. Public opinion. State your opinion. Say you're doing a bad job. Let them know how unhappy you are, aka be the squeaky wheel. Do not be afraid to call bullshit if you have to call bullshit. You know, I take a page from Jon Stewart in The Daily Show. Do not be afraid to call upon the Messiah of Bullshit Mountain, that he's standing on Bullshit Mountain. Keep them honest. Press them when possible, always in a courteous manner, by the way, always. Remind them who they represent. And again, please just vote. So let's talk a little bit about the controversies that may come across on CSM. There's always the issue of breaches of NDA. And examples of this is Darius Johnson, former member, CSM member of Goonswarm, was known to leak out information. Just recently, there has been allegations that a lot of the super capital leak changes have been leaked to certain nullsec entities. So that is always that's always a thing you have to worry about. These kind of things are very dangerous, and the fact that it harms the relationship of trust between the CSM and CCP. Also, there is a lot of interpersonal squabbles that are made public. CSM9 was known for, particularly for like Cyan Kumitomo versus Xander Fina. One prior to was like Alexei Card and Ripper Teg. I know they've gone back and forth a couple of times. And again, just recently, there was a small spat between DJ Funky Bacon and CCP Lilo. It's going to happen, and the reason being is that serving on the CSM can expose you to a constant conflict with fellow CSM members, CCP staff, and the player base. Get over yourself and deal with it. Harden the fuck up. It's going to happen. It is confrontational because we've all dealt with the metagame or talked about the metagame, and there's a general like discussion that we should fuck the metagame bullshit. And if you believe or subscribe to this mentality, it was nice knowing you, and I recommend you go play Hello Kitty Adventure Island. Because EVE Online is a political game. Failure to understand this, failure to engage, failure to even deal with it equals an unlikelihood of you even getting elected or being effective. So you want to run for CSM. Putting yourself out there, congratulations. You're going to need all the help you can get. You know, you have to make alliances and share platforms. You have to engage. Reference the metagame. You have to find your voice. Blogs, being on EVE Media, podcasts, news sites, social media. You need to find your community of players who are going to support you, because no person is an island in all this. You can't do it alone. You can't go it alone. You need help. And when should I start? Why haven't you started? The candidacy period starts the moment CSM winners are announced at FanFest. Stand out. Players need to know who you are. If you have no voice, how am I going to vote for you? I don't know who you are. Cross-pollinate your arguments and other candidates and win the campaign narrative, even if you're not elected. Because failure is only the beginning. Because even if you don't get elected the first time, there's always next time. I reference against Mike Azariah. He has run, I think, a total of 7 times, 4 times being failures. But he's now on his third run. I heard that you're not running next year, unfortunately. But it's like, it is just a starting point. If you are a smaller candidate who no one knows about you, this is a platform to build your next platform and a one after that. You need to keep on going. One of our biggest detriments as EVE players is the evil word effort. Effort. Oh, it's effort. I don't want to do that. This is what it is. If you want to become a community player, you need to put yourself there. You need to put in the effort. So if you'd like to continue the discussion with myself on this, like there's also, of course, in game. You can find me on Twitter. Oh, Twitter and Tweet Slack, like there is. You can always find me on our website, capstable.net, and CSM Watch and podcast at capstable.net. So also some quick little acknowledgments. LogFox with Eve Prosper, because we work with them an awful lot, particularly when discussion about like the current capital leaks and such. The crew, of course, at CapStable. Members of CSM, especially Mike Azariah and Jane Fillen, for helping us out and answering my questions 3 o'clock in the morning. And of course, CCP Lilo and Manifest and Logibro.